weeks ago, an Amish barn burned. Word has gone out that today a new one will be raised. Already in the pre-dawn darkness of a heavy morning fog, the Amish community is gathering.
Earlier start you get, the better it goes. We aim to be done with the raisins like at lunchtime. I'm still amazed that this community, if something like that happens, a lot of people show up. When there's a fire, the whole neighborhood's there, which I hope we don't lose. Everybody's there to help.
It requires the work of many men to raise the heavy timber walls into place.
We had so many people. There was people lined up from here clear out to where they ate with nail aprons to come in to help work.
The Amish raise the walls of a timber frame barn today the same way they have done so for centuries, by hand. Men overseeing the work call out instructions in a dialect of German called Pennsylvania Dutch as the timbers are slowly and carefully lifted into place. To remain faithful to their ordnung or the set of unwritten rules they live by, the Amish may not willingly agree to be photographed. Some are more ambivalent than others about this rule. It is open to many interpretations. Some may ignore the camera if it is kept at a distance. A few believe that, even though a camera is present, as long as they are not knowingly part of the photography process, they have not violated the ordnung. Others make it clear that they do not approve of photography under any circumstance.
I was out back and bringing in another load of hay.
An Amish farmer describes the day his barn burned.
Then all at once I saw smoke, and well, it took a minute or so, to really realize it's something that there's smoke that shouldn't be there. So we just had a 5-week-old baby then. So my niece was here helping out she was a hired girl. So she came up top of the hill to get me, and that was when I didn't know was it the house or the barn till she came up. And at that time the children were, this was 1:30, I think. I knew the children went to bed after lunch, so I didn't know was it the house or the barn. So, it was a relief to hear it was the barn.
So you were really concerned at that point?
Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't know what... Yeah, it was a relief it was the barn. The first guy that knows it was a neighbor going the road, he saw smoke coming out of the barn. So he came in and got my wife, and he called it in, and he kind of took charge. They were here 11 minutes after the call came in. When the call came in, it was about 6-foot diameter up on the barn floor.
And what was the cause?
It was something with the elevator. We don't know, was it the motor, was it a hot bearing? We have no idea.
It was a tinder box. It was so dry, and we stood up on the barn floor and we could see it burn about a mile away. The walls just collapsed.
Were there people that came right away to help you?
Oh, yeah, they came out of the woodwork.
Amish, non-Amish?
Yeah, everybody. Oh, it doesn't matter here what you are. Not at a time like this.
Yeah.
As soon as it was cool off the next day, they cleaned away the rubble.
Probably the next thing we did was got a committee in to help me make plans.
How soon was that after the burning?
We met that evening.
That evening?
Mm-hmm.
And the committee would have been composed of who?
3 neighbor men, 3 farmers right local here.
All Amish?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and that was a first evening, and then, you know, there's more neighbors got involved in, you know, there's a lot of responsibilities if you're thinking about building a barn in 12 days with 2 Sundays in there. The workload had to be distributed out.
When did the barn builder get involved? How did that happen?
Next morning, we went over to talk with him the next morning, and he brought his blueprint table and everything over. He was over here by 10:30 or 11 o'clock, set everything up and started drawing new plans.
There's a lot involved before the actual barn raising.
The responsibility for designing a new barn falls to the barn builder.
You know, the first thing you do is go out and decide what the size of the barn and how they want to turn and decide, and then you got to figure out the beams and the choys, and to figure out where your posts come to carry the weight from the barn. Then you start laying out the top to see what it takes.
The entire structure is fit together without nails, just with wooden pegs. And that has all be marked and cut and everything ready, all ready to fit together.
We talked about for 2.5 hours, and his neighbor Lee has a sawmill just maybe 1.5 miles. I said, Lee, tomorrow morning I'll be down and you'll have a list to cut. As soon as I know the foundation size, I can usually get the top laid out pretty quick. And I worked till about 10, 11 o'clock that night. Got that whole list ready and went down the next morning and gave it to him, and he started cutting.
Would you generally use oak in that post and beam?
Most of them. White oak, red oak, poplar, maple, walnut, cherry, whatever they could find out in his woods. We had 12 sawmills cutting for that barn.
Trees are cut from local hardwood groves. The logs are hauled to local sawmills, some owned by the Amish, where they are cut into the heavy timbers that will become the structure of a post and beam barn. Mortises and tenons are hand-cut into the timbers, then holes drilled for the wooden pegs that will hold the entire structure together.
And then if the green timber, then use a dry peg. It absorbs the moisture from the green wood and becomes very tight, and then they dry down together. It's just a perfectly tight fit. It will last for hundreds of years.
What goes into a decision about post and beam?
Well, it's probably the sturdiest thing out there, I think.
The barn these Amish are building uses post and beam construction for the sidewalls, but they are replacing traditional rafters with modern pre-manufactured trusses. The Amish willingly hire cranes to place the trusses on the taller parts of the barn. There is no other practical way to lift these pre-manufactured trusses into place. Hiring a piece of modern equipment that they may not own does not violate their rules regarding use of technology. Besides, Amish who are in the business of building houses for the larger non-Amish community have become accustomed to using such equipment. It is necessary for even modest jobs when the owners of these new homes cannot supply the manpower necessary for a house or barn raising. On the lower walls, trusses are hand-carried and lifted into place by groups of men and boys. Barn raisings are quite rare in the Amish community. Most Amish may not experience more than a few in their entire lives. so the barn raising itself becomes an event to be enjoyed by the entire Amish community. It has become symbolic not only for all of us, but also for them, of their strong commitment to a culture of community. In this culture of community, no one individual lives life in isolation, but rather is part of a network of caring and concerned individuals that collectively provide an effective safety net when tragedy strikes. Children are welcome at any barn raising, but they keep a safe distance from the potentially dangerous work of the adults. Much of what Amish children learn about being Amish, they learn by observing. By being present, children absorb the core value expressed by a barn raising, that they are part of a community that they can depend on in times of need. Barn raisings, probably more than most social events, allow youth to interact with their peers from nearby church districts. Here they may also meet non-Amish youth from the neighborhood who sometimes introduce them to technology frowned upon by their own community. These interactions with non-Amish continue throughout their lives. While choosing cultural isolation, the Amish are amazingly aware of technologies and social mores beyond their own world. One does not find electric-powered tools in the Amish community. Circular saws are rather powered by gasoline engines or in some cases battery. Running a generator to recharge batteries is acceptable, but plugging an electric power saw into the generator would cross the fine line that the Amish have defined as being too much in touch with the modern world. So much of what the Amish do is informed by tradition and symbolism. A visual connection to the impersonal power grid makes them uncomfortable, but generating electricity by solar panels or by generator for charging batteries maintains the symbolic distance from the outside world. A barn raising may look chaotic.
600 or 800 men show up. If you were watching all day, you may or may not have been able to tell who was in charge.
The barn builder organizes the raising.
I appoint two guys to engineer the one side of it. And they take a group to them and make sure that side gets done. And you just go around the barn like that and the guys up on the roof. And I got 6 boys on the group now. 2 nephews and 4 of my own boys.
Everyone looks to these men for instructions as to the order of the work. The barn builder also places someone in charge of the steel siding and roofing. These men know intuitively from past building experience when to activate the men for whom they are responsible.
The day of the barn raising, the head carpenter stands back and watches. As he said, I slept nothing last night. The day of the raising, his work is done. He just stands back and watches it unfold.
A barn raising is simply an extension of group work that the Amish learn already in early childhood. Children work with each other and with their parents to plant a garden or milk the cows. Neighbors helping each other is a normal, frequent activity. Volunteers showing up at a barn raising need little oversight. They know from experience the rhythms that working together as a single unit requires. Long before the roof is finished, the steel siding is already being attached to the outside walls. Some more seasoned with working with steel siding are responsible for cutting the openings for windows and doors. Measurements are called down to older men who cut pieces to fit. Younger men on ladders or cranes screw the steel to the wooden studs with battery-powered drills. Roofing boards are attached to the trusses and trimmed to the correct length after they are in place. A layer of plastic is laid down, stapled to the boards, and steel roofing panels carried into position. These interlocking panels form a tight-fitting, waterproof roof that will last for generations.
The neighboring churches would bring in the noon meal.
A few women may make enough pies for several hundred men. Others bake fresh bread. Local businesses are often eager to donate the meat and vegetables.
Like the churches my brothers and sisters are in, a lot of those help with maybe one church had cake, or 2 churches had cake and a couple had pie.
At this barn raising, the meal is served by 11 a.m. Working from before daybreak, the volunteers are hungry. The barn is already under cover, and tables and benches can be set inside. Besides, by noon, many participants will start to drift away. Fewer men will be needed to finish the roof, doors, and windows. Benches normally used for church services, stored and transported in a specially built enclosed wagon, are set up inside the new barn. Amish worship services, including singing, are conducted in German. The second song sung in all Amish worship services is called the Loblied, or praise song. It begins with the words, "O God, Father, we praise you, and your goodness exalt." After lunch, hay, either purchased or donated, begins arriving. By the end of the day, the barn will be filled with feed for horses and cows and be fully operational. By mid-afternoon, the women leave and the men follow shortly thereafter, their task finished. Small scraps of wood left behind fill a young Amish boy's toy truck. Here, in a different Amish community, They are using more modern construction techniques.
Morning. Hey, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In the past, the Amish have been known for their post and beam construction. I see a lot of these things are going up now with balloon construction. What's the advantage, disadvantage?
Usually the post and beam, they farm tobacco. Still, the guys that are good, heavy tobacco farmers want the post and beam. This guy is not a tobacco farmer that owns the farm, and he wants open space with no posts in the way. That's the reason to go with it. Yeah, that's the only reason.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You just wanted the clear span.
Yeah, it's not much cheaper.
Not much cheaper.
No, but it's just
Does it go up slower?
quicker. No,
Not the
it's
same?
not much different. It's just different people's options. Just one got one idea and another guy got another idea.
Okay.
Rather than going to the forest to find their lumber for this barn, lumber from the local lumber yard is used. The construction style used is commonly referred to as stick-built. Rather than wood being joined together with mortises and tenons, it is nailed together. Stick-built construction changes the order of a barn raising. Where once the building site would have been cleared and the foundations, walls, and floor completed before the barn raising, now several things can happen at once. The site is cleared of debris even while the concrete blocks are delivered and block walls built. Once the foundation and block walls are built, the floor joists are laid, a floor built, and then construction of the walls begins. To the public, it appears to take longer. This is only because by the time most of us see a post and beam barn raising, there has been significant preparation, and the raising takes only an impressive half day or so. With stick-built construction, we see more of the entire process. These Amish have hired a van and driver to bring them and their building tools to the barn raising. Should everyone come by horse and buggy, finding space, feed, and water for so many animals can be a problem. Here, air power from a gasoline-driven air compressor is used to run their saws. Older boys, as well as older men, are given jobs that are less strenuous. Usually boys are not allowed to be part of the crew that works on the barn itself until they are about 14 years old.
You know, boys are boys. Mix the boys in with the men. I mean, don't let a group of boys be on one spot. Get them moving.
Lumber must be cut to length. Generally, this job is reserved for the older men. The women are always in charge of the meal. At this raising, they leave the barn raising site early and assemble at a neighboring farm where the meal is being prepared. When mealtime arrives, wagons cleared of their loads of wood become convenient taxis. Walls are built on the floor and then raised into position, but they are not built with the heavy timbers of a post and beam barn. The Amish do not depend on commercial insurance companies to cover the loss of a barn. Rather, they have their own informal form of insurance.
It's the best insurance policy that we can have or own, better than any insurance that we can buy.
Frugality and their willingness to help each other during times of loss keeps costs low enough that self-insurance remains feasible.
You don't want to go out and spend a lot of money and all at once you have a big bill yet here that our insurance or whatever you want to call it didn't take care of.
Talk to me about that insurance. What kind of insurance?
Well, everybody has to take it has a valuation form in our church group. And then we have a fund. For example, if the fund gets low, everybody has to pay $1 per thousand that you're valued at and put that in the fund. And that's there. If something like this happens, in our church area, if everybody puts in $1 a thousand, you're talking $600,000. You know, that covers some, and that's just storm, fire, and theft. It's a non-profit thing. Nobody gets anything out of it.
Right.
Every church has an appraiser.
And the appraisers?
Check to see what the difference was in square footage and how much you got in per square foot. You know, that has a lot of weight on what they...
Coming together, that mutual aid is part of what it means to be Amish.
Well, it's the way we want to keep it. We don't want to lose that. Can you imagine how much labor went into this barn? Think about paying those guys $15, $20 an hour. And with a commercial insurance company taking care of that, you think we should lose it?
Now, as barn raising day approaches, to the outside, you know, we never hear when that day is. Do you people know ahead of that day?
Oh, I would think so.
You know that day is coming and this.
They just normally say it a couple days in advance.
And how did the word spread?
Just by mouth.
What were you doing that day?
Watching. Oh, there's still small decisions to make. And then there's a lot of people show up and want to talk with you and had similar experiences, you know.
How do you feel about that? Was it helpful?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's kind of binds a little group together. Just like anything else, if you have something in common, you start talking, and what gets you to appreciate other people more probably, or what they do for you. And you don't really have to do anything really major big to make an impact.
People just being there.
Yeah, just being there and their time.
So what does a family go through when the barn burns?
Well, they're stressed out. And you know, the church group comes in and helps with everything. The hardest part for them is to accept the help coming in. I mean, they can never pay it back. And people don't want them to pay it back. You know, there's a lot of volunteer help coming in. At David's barn raising, we had 700 or more people to help. You know, we've had barns burned from lightning and barns burned from lanterns accidentally, and we've had arson. Now that's the toughest barns to build, if you know it was arson. Because you don't know what's the guy gonna do next. It's sad that you got guys out there setting fires like that. And there's barns that we rebuilt that maybe small children was playing with matches. We had one, I think this boy was like 6, 7, or 8 years old, and he really liked to play with a lighter. And it finally happened in the barn, the whole barn burned. 3 high school kids were out drunk, and they lit that barn, and they lit a sawmill, and they lit a machinery shop. I mean, in a half hour's time, they had him. The law had him.
Since stick-built construction does not require as many men to erect heavy beam walls, men tend to arrive later in the morning. At any given time, far fewer men will be seen building the barn, but it remains a group effort with a large part of the local community participating. While accidents do happen, they are rare.
Now, we've had accidents. Everybody's got to be careful. I remember one barn when one guy fell down and broke his ankle. And we had a hammer drop on somebody's head already that they had to go in.
How does it make you feel when the barn is completed?
Good.
There must be a sense of satisfaction.
It is. It is. Especially if nobody gets hurt.
Would you say your life has changed since then? You and your family's life in any way?
Probably some, but you just hear more. You just hear something like that happens. You hear it right away, or you try to help out. You probably try to help other people more than what you did before. And it better be that way, I think.
This barn, no, David's barn, the masons, they were supposed to measure in between the wall and his cow stable. And they hooked on the outside of the wall and put this wall in. And I didn't know this. And Nelson, he's the guy that put the stanchions in. And he was working on it. He started in the morning and he kept on going. And then at around 4 o'clock, he says, "Come on down here, I want to show you something." And then he told me that wall is a foot over this way. And I looked at it and I says, "Now what are you doing, Nelson? You're crowding everything together." And they had just laid that wall the day before. And we was talking about that. I said, "Nelson, if we built this barn and crowd everything for David now, he'll never like his barn." I says, "Let's get that wall out of here and relay it." And there was people standing around and I motioned them over and I says, "Take them walls out." They looked at me. I says, "I'm serious, take them out." And they just kind of stood back and I think they thought I'm crazy. I just went over and got the bar and started pushing that wall over. I says, "I'm gonna move it, we're gonna move it." So I got on the phone and called another contractor. And I said, "Steve, I'm in trouble down here. Where they laid up that center wall, it's got to be moved west a foot." He actually helped put it in. I says, "Can you come down right away?" He says, "I'll be there." In 15 minutes he showed up and that wall was out, cleaned up. They started laying block at 5 o'clock that evening, and they laid it all up, and the next morning they could put them stanchions exactly where they needed to be. I mean, they used 90% of the block. It wasn't cured that hard yet.
Barns such as the Amish build were once a dominant feature of the rural American landscape. Changing agricultural practices and a diminishing rural population have caused most such barns to fall into disuse and disrepair. Barns have become the nostalgic subject of artists and occasionally the target of preservationists. Like so many other features of past American life, the Amish have preserved the traditional barn for their own use. Diversified agriculture using horsepower that features livestock as well as grain and hay crops still make large barns a primary feature of Amish farmsteads. But changes are underway. Once, more than 90% of the Amish made their primary income from farm-related activities. Today, in some Amish communities, nearly 90% depend on business-related activities for their main income. Such Amish families may have only 1 or 2 horses and no other livestock. A rapidly increasing Amish population has precipitated a housing boom in Amish country. New homesteads are now composed of a house with a small barn that often matches the architectural style and colors of the house. It seems more closely related to a garage in many cases than a barn. These small barns do not require barn raisings. They are built by the same construction crews that erect the houses. While the large traditional barns that are part of our collective memory of rural America will continue to exist in Amish communities, they are becoming less dominant. Today's barns are more architecturally acceptable in expanding suburban landscapes to which even the Amish are contributing. The Amish recall for us a time before modernity, when most in America lived close to the soil, when the lives of individuals closely intertwined with those of their neighbors. A barn raising stands as a reminder that even today, with all our technology and sophistication, there is no substitute for a caring community. In good times and bad, but particularly in times of tragedy, we still need each other.